Stop the presses, call 911, bring in the hazmat team, because somebody spotted a Confederate symbol during Mardi Gras. And this is at New Orleans city site. Welcome back to the channel, Culture Confederacy here. It's Thursday, so happy Thursday, everybody. Thank you again for watching, subscribing, being a part of this thing called the Culture Confederacy. And you know where this is going. You know exactly where this is going. Everybody's freaking out because it's a Confederate symbol. What the hell? I've got some examples here of Jim Crow in places you wouldn't expect. Just bear with me. So getting to the story here, once again, New Orleans city site. So get this, the crew of ISIS, I'm not making this up, the crew of ISIS, which heads up one of these parades. Now, everybody thinks of Mardi Gras as just taking place in New Orleans. Actually, there are several different events that happen during this time of year, several different parades. So one of the groups is called, I think they're all called crews. It's K-R-E-W-E. Crew of ISIS. So crew of ISIS, yes, it's spelled I-S-I-S. This, by the way, came out yesterday. They're investigating a claim that one of its riders on one of these floats allegedly threw Confederate battle flag beads or Confederate beads. Well, it was beads that had the Confederate colors on them, and there was a medallion attached to it that had the Confederate flag on there. It said Southern Pride. So they're investigating this, which happened this past Saturday during Mardi Gras. And it happened in Kenner, which is part of Jefferson Parish. Now, Kenner is the largest city in Jefferson Parish. All the counties down there are called parishes. And they've got about 65,000 residents. So Ashell Bates, who's a Kenner resident, was attending the event with her daughter and 7-year-old grandson when a strand of red and blue beads were thrown towards them. So her daughter picked it up and noticed that it had a Confederate medallion. But the Confederate battle flag came before the KKK, came before the Dixiecrats. It was just a battle flag. And the colors on the flag, the red and the blue, to the Southerners at the time, represented the true Republican colors, which meant valor, purity, and truth. Had nothing to do with slavery. Now, yes, they were debating slavery back then. But New Jersey didn't abolish slavery, talked about this before, till January 1866. Delaware, late 1865. But they really didn't end all forms of servitude in Delaware till about 1901. Just thought I'd throw that in there. But the first star of the Confederate battle flag is the Bonnie Blue, which goes back to 1810 with the Republic of West Florida, where you had these settlers in the South that declared their independence from Spanish rule. But wait a minute, I thought this was all about Jim Crow and white supremacy, preserving slavery at all cost. So getting back to the story here, as I mentioned, so they throw these beads out to the crowd, and Ashell Bates, she's there with her daughter, grandson. They pick up the beads, and oh my God, it's the Confederate battle flag that says Southern Pride. Now, Bates posted a picture of the object on Facebook, saying it should have not been thrown from the parade float. Now, a similar object was thrown during the Cleopatra parade in 2022. Now, let's back it up here for a moment. So, the group that's heading up this particular event, part of Mardi Gras, is called Crew of ISIS. Isn't ISIS a terrorist group in the Middle East that stones to death women and kills people who are LGBTQ? So are you calling yourself Crew of ISIS? Is the word crew racist? Just curious. And Cleopatra, doesn't that have connections to... Well, wasn't Cleopatra, was she Greek? I forget how the story goes. But she was in Egypt, right? And Egypt had slaves. Didn't the slaves help build the pyramids? I'm getting lost here. See, it's so hard to keep up. Because if everything's racist, sexist, homophobic, we've got to look back through history and see what symbols were really racist, which ones weren't. Who built this? Who built that? So as I mentioned, Bates posted the object on Facebook. It went viral. Pardon me again. Suffering from kind of a sore throat this morning. And according to ISIS captain Kristen Bertucci, the crew does not condone or sell such offensive objects. So her last name is Bertucci. I'm getting a picture here of Columbus. Wasn't Columbus Italian? Didn't he kill all these Indians? So maybe she should get rid of her last name, Bertucci. Now, the crew also forbids the throwing of items that are lewd, crude, or offensive, such as, let's say, condoms. I've seen that thrown at parades. When I was younger, I had that happen, local parade. Somebody came up to where I was sitting, and they just threw a whole bunch of condoms on the thing there. And this was in the South, by the way. And no racist, whoops, slip of the tongue here. Freudian slip. No racist pamphlets were handed out, by the way. I was going to say rapist. No rapist pamphlets were handed out. Okay, I'll just start. This is a one-take video again, okay? We're just doing it as it is today. So, YouTube, so don't dock me on this, all right? Now, Bertucci added that the rider who tossed the item to the crowd does not represent the values of the crew of ISIS. They don't represent our values now. These people would throw out these Confederate colored beads with a medallion with a Confederate battle flag on it that says Southern Pride, doesn't represent us, even though our name is Crew of ISIS and ISIS is a terrorist group over in the Middle East. Okay, trying to keep up here. Now, Kenner Mayor Michael Glazer also chimed in and stated that the city backs Crew of ISIS's regulations regarding objects that are thrown, but Kenner's municipal code does not contain any specifics about Mardi Gras throws, except if it pertains to anything that's explosive, glass, or, as mentioned earlier, something like condoms, something that would be pornographic. Take a sip of my coffee here. Now, back in 2023, New Orleans did change the rules regarding these beads. That you can only have the Carnival organization logo on them or name of whatever the group is that's part of Mardi Gras. And they're going to start fully implementing these new policies in 2025. Now, Lachelle Bates, who writes, get this, the crew of Athena, so we're talking about ancient Greece, Athena, didn't they have slaves in ancient Greece? See, they're going to have to erase all of their names of all their groups here. Isis, Athena, Cleopatra. Well, that might be seen as sexist because, women power, 2024. So, Lachelle Bates, who rides the crew of Athena, believes that the Confederate bead somehow got mixed up in a bag somewhere and accidentally got thrown out to the crowd. So she's telling people to check their beads to make sure there's nothing offensive in these bags. Now, there's a related story talking about this at Medium. Oh, and this is a real scrape. So, in this related article, they're saying here that the Confederate battle flag is equivalent to the swastika. You've heard that one before, right? Can I tell you something, being somebody of German heritage? Not even close. Now, yes, it's true that Hitler did study Jim Crow laws, but guess what? Jim Crow actually started in the North. It didn't start in the South. It goes back to the 1830s, 1840s. Something called a Jim Crow car had to deal with the early railroads. People were misbehaving, were put in what they called Jim Crow cars, whether they were white or black. But speaking of that, just to prove a point here, because everybody believes the South is racist. The Confederate battle flag is racist. It's all about racism, preserving slavery. It wasn't about preserving slavery. It was about being allowed to settle in the territories like everybody else because they saw themselves, the southern states saw themselves as equal players under the Constitution at the time, the way that the Constitution was written. That was what the argument was about. It was about, quote unquote, preserving slavery, because you're really not preserving slavery if you're moving slavery from one area to another. It was all about competition and power. All about competition and power. That's what it was about. So getting to my notes here of some segregation laws that you're not aware of that happened back in the day. 1854, San Francisco. They segregated their schools. Blacks were not allowed to go to school. And they later changed that law to Negroes, Mongolians, and Indians. And in 1931, they banned marriage between Asians and whites in California. So should we take down the California state flag? Anything to do with California? Now, Iowa, surprisingly, Iowa was the first state in 1868 to desegregate its schools. In 1974, you had violent busing riots in Boston. And in 1921, how many know this? That in 1921, New Mexico passed a constitutional amendment, state constitutional amendment, called the Alien Land Law, that banned Asian immigrants from owning land. And in the 1950s, at a Silver City restaurant in New Mexico, they had a sign that read, "No Mexicans or dogs." So who's the racist one here? Who's the racist one? People in the South? The Confederate battle flag? And this whole idea, as I said, that it's equivalent to Nazi Germany, one of the reasons they chose the design of the Confederate battle flag as was not to offend the Jewish population in the South, because you had Jewish soldiers in the Confederate Army. See, nobody researches this stuff. So I thought I'd come here and talk about this. So hold the phone, stop the presses, call in the hazmat team, call 911, because somebody found, oh my God, Confederate colored beads and a medallion with a Confederate battle flag on it that said Southern Pride, and somehow that's equivalent to white supremacy. And according to media, if you go to Mardi Gras, you're going to experience a slice of racism. Well, isn't Mardi Gras based somewhat on African folklore and voodoo? So how is that racist? These people are so full of it. They're full of it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. You can also follow me at Instagram, #JasonComposes, because I write music in my spare time. Or you can find me, like I said, my throat's kind of giving me issues today. Or you can find me at Culture Confed 1 on X. This is the Culture Confederacy saying peace out. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you for being with me. God bless this thing called the United States. I'll catch you next time, and y'all have a great Thursday.